The rain had been relentless for 3 days straight, drumming against the tin roof of the old farmhouse like a mournful drumbeat. Outside, the fields were soaked and churned into thick mud, swallowing the footprints of anyone who dared to walk. The wind whispered through the cracked windows, carrying the faint, bitter scent of earth and rain. For John Miller, the farm was no longer the sanctuary it once had been. It was a place weighed down by loss and uncertainty. John stood near the stable door, his hands rough and calloused, gripping the worn wooden frame. His eyes, deep-set and tired, scanned the empty stalls. The air smelled of hay, damp wood, and something faintly metallic. A sharp pang tightened at his chest. It had been only hours since his favorite mare, Daisy, had given birth, yet something was wrong. Daisy had been frantic, restless all night, but now silence reigned. The foal had arrived too early. The life within the fragile newborn trembled against the cold, unforgiving world. When John had finally found the tiny creature, it lay curled on a thin bed of straw, weak and trembling, its coat slick and matted. The mare had been gone. John's heart twisted. It was the first time in years that a foal had been born on the farm, and now it was alone. His breaths came unevenly as he knelt beside the fragile bundle. The foal's eyes fluttered weakly open, reflecting the dim light in the barn. There was something fragile, almost ghostly, about it, a life hanging by a thread. John's hands trembled as he reached out to touch the foal's damp muzzle, careful not to startle it. "You're not alone now," he whispered, his voice rough with fatigue and sorrow. The sound seemed to fill the empty space around them, carrying the weight of a promise. John pulled a faded blanket from the corner, wrapping the foal gently, as if shielding a flicker of fragile hope from a storm. He could feel the tiny heartbeat beneath his palm, a faint, irregular rhythm. The cold was creeping in, and time was slipping away. The nights had never felt lonelier. Since his wife had passed years ago, John had lived in quiet isolation. The farm was both his refuge and his reminder of what he had lost. Neighbors whispered about the once vibrant man, who now spoke only to the animals and the wind. His only family was the land, the horses, and the memories that clung like shadows. Yet, as he cradled the newborn, something stirred, a flicker of determination. He wouldn't let this little life slip away. The morning dawned pale and gray, with the rain finally giving way to mist that hovered low over the fields. John carried the foal into the farmhouse, setting up a makeshift nursery near the fireplace. The flickering flames cast warm light across the wooden floor, contrasting the chill that still clung to the air. He fetched a bottle, filled it with milk warm just so, and hesitated for a moment before offering it to the foal. The animal's mouth twitched weakly as it struggled to suckle, but gradually it gained strength. John sat beside it, silent except for the soft slurping sounds and the occasional creak of the old house settling. Hours passed in this quiet ritual. The farm outside seemed to hold its breath, the heavy clouds parting to reveal shafts of fragile sunlight. For the first time in a long while, John felt something like hope stir within him. But the neighbors were not so kind. Word spread quickly about John's decision to raise the orphan foal alone. "Foolish," some whispered. "It'll never make it. Why bother?" Others shook their heads, unsure whether the man had finally lost his mind or if he was simply desperate for a purpose. One afternoon, as John tended to the foal's small shelter in the barn, he noticed a shadow lingering at the edge of the field. It was Tom, the town's veterinarian and old friend, whose visits had become rare in recent years. Tom's face was lined with concern as he approached slowly. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Tom said, voice low but firm. "That foal's barely hanging on. You need to accept that sometimes nature has its own course." John met his friend's gaze, the stubborn set of his jaw belying his exhaustion. "I'm not ready to give up," he said quietly. "This one's different. I can feel it." Tom sighed, stepping into the barn's warmth. "You've carried so much, John. Maybe it's time to let someone else help." For a moment, the two men sat in silence, the weight of years and unspoken grief filling the space between them. John looked down at the foal nestled in the straw, eyes closed but breathing steadily now. He traced a finger along its tiny legs, fragile and wobbly. "I don't want to be alone anymore," John admitted softly. "Not like this." Tom placed a hand on John's shoulder. "You're not alone. Not anymore." That night, as the farm settled into a fragile peace, John felt the stirrings of a bond deeper than he had imagined possible. The full, soft breathing was a steady rhythm in the quiet house, a heartbeat that echoed within his own. Days stretched into weeks. The foal grew stronger, though every step was a fight. John spent hours outside, guiding the creature through the soggy fields, teaching it to stand, to walk, to trust. The farm, once empty and silent, now pulsed with life. The seasons began to shift. The damp chill of early spring gave way to warmer days. John's hands were rougher, his back bent from the constant care, but his eyes shone with something long lost. There were setbacks, too, a night of high fever, a stumble that left the foal lame for days, but each time they endured. Neighbors started to watch. Curiosity mingled with cautious hope. Some brought small gifts, a bag of oats, a soft blanket, a whispered word of encouragement. The old farmer was no longer the solitary figure he had been. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with streaks of gold and crimson, John stood in the field with the young horse beside him. The foal, now a slender colt, nuzzled his hand, its coat shining in the fading light. "You've come a long way," John murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "We both have." The moment held a quiet triumph, fragile but undeniable. For the first time, John allowed himself to believe in a future beyond loss. Yet beneath the surface, the weight of the past lingered. Memories of failure, of loss, whispered in the edges of his mind. The colt's survival was only the beginning, not the end. That night, as John sat alone by the fire, he stared into the flames and thought of the long road ahead. The farm was healing slowly, but so was he. The bond with the colt was growing stronger, pulling him back from the edge of despair. In the silence, he made a promise, not just to the horse, but to himself. No matter the challenges, no matter the doubts, he would see this journey through. Outside, the stars blinked faintly through the mist, silent witnesses to the beginning of something new. The days lengthened as spring gave way to early summer, and the farm seemed to breathe again beneath a warm sun and endless blue skies. The colt, now named Chance by John, a name heavy with hope and quiet defiance, had grown noticeably stronger. His legs, once fragile sticks barely able to hold his weight, were now firm and steady, carrying him across the field with the tentative enthusiasm of youth. But strength did not come without struggle. Each morning began with the same ritual, John leading Chance out into the dewy grass, the soft earth springy beneath their feet. The air was thick with the scent of wildflowers and fresh-cut hay, a stark contrast to the cold, damp days when Chance had first been born. The farm had transformed along with them, the dull ache of loss replaced by the steady pulse of life. Yet, despite the calm surface, tension simmered beneath. John was no stranger to hardship. Years of toil had carved lines into his face, and the memory of failure clung like a shadow. His farm had seen better days, once prosperous, now struggling under the weight of weather, debt, and isolation. Raising Chance was not just about saving a life. It was about fighting the tide of his own despair. On this particular morning, as the sun broke through a thin veil of clouds, John noticed something troubling. Chance's gait was uneven, a subtle limp that hadn't been there before. The colt tried to hide it, but John's experienced eyes caught the hesitation in every step. He knelt beside the young horse, running a hand along the taut muscles of its leg, searching for the source of pain. "You can't keep pretending everything's fine," John murmured, frustration tinged with worry. The colt nuzzled his hand, trusting and vulnerable. Just then, footsteps echoed behind them. Turning, John saw Tom approaching, the town's veterinarian and a rare visitor these days. Tom's face was lined with concern as he assessed Chance carefully, running his hands over the colt's legs, flexing joints with practiced precision. "It's a strain," Tom said finally. "Could be worse, but it needs rest and careful monitoring. Overexertion at this stage could set him back." John swallowed hard, the weight of responsibility settling heavier. The farm, the colt, everything hinged on this fragile balance. Chance was more than an animal. He was a symbol, a tether to a future John had almost stopped believing in. "Rest won't come easy," John said grimly. "He's restless. So am I." Tom nodded, understanding deeper than words. "You're both fighting more than just the injury." Over the next weeks, John adjusted. He slowed the colt's training, replacing long runs with gentle walks. He studied Chance's every movement, attuned to subtle signs of pain or fatigue. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally, but John refused to relent. This was their shared battle. One fought step by agonizing step. In these quieter moments, the bond between man and horse deepened. John found himself speaking softly to Chance during the slow walks. Words meant as much for himself as the colt. "Hold on a little longer, kid. We've come too far to fall now." At night, John's thoughts drifted off into the past. Memories came unbidden, fragments of a life once full, now fragmented. The laughter of his wife, the joy of harvests that once filled these fields, and the sting of loss that had nearly broken him. Raising Chance was more than survival, it was redemption. One afternoon, while repairing a fence near the edge of the property, John spotted a figure approaching. It was Mary, a woman who had lived on the outskirts of town for years, a horse trainer known for her gentle but firm methods. Their paths had crossed briefly before, but today she carried an air of purpose. "I heard about the colt," Mary said, eyes warm but sharp. "I thought you might need a hand." John hesitated, pride and wariness warring inside him. Trust had become a scarce commodity, but something about Mary's calm confidence stirred a flicker of hope. "I'm not sure he's ready for training," John admitted. "He's still fragile." Mary smiled gently. "Sometimes what's needed isn't more strength, but patience and understanding. I can help." Over the following days, Mary visited regularly. Together, they worked with Chance, focusing on healing and building trust rather than speed or power. Mary's methods were different, softer, more attuned to the colt's rhythms. John watched as Chance responded, his movements becoming more assured, his spirit brighter. Through Mary, John found a mentor and ally, someone who challenged his stubbornness but never dismissed his pain. Their conversations were quiet but meaningful, often revolving around the delicate balance between pushing forward and knowing when to yield. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across the fields, John and Mary stood watching Chance move freely in the paddock. The colt's coat gleamed in the fading light, muscles rippling beneath smooth skin. "He's got something special," Mary said quietly. "More than just strength. There's a fire in him." John nodded, a lump rising in his throat. "I felt it too." Yet even as they spoke, an undercurrent of unease lingered. Chance's past was a mystery, born alone into the world after loss. His future was uncertain, clouded by the fragile beginnings he had endured. The colt carried with him not just hope, but the weight of survival. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in, dark clouds swallowing the sky. John was in the barn when he heard the frantic pounding of hooves outside. Rushing out, he found Chance caught in the rising floodwaters near the creek that bordered the farm. The colt struggled against the swift current, panic in his eyes. Without hesitation, John plunged into the cold water, muscles burning as he fought the pull. Reaching Chance, he wrapped his arms around the shivering animal, steadying him until the flood receded. They collapsed onto the muddy bank, soaked and exhausted but alive. That night, as John dried off by the fire, the near tragedy hung heavy in the air. The farm was a place of endless tests, each one threatening to break them. Yet, in the quiet moments between storms, a fragile hope endured. Days later, while tending to the colt's recovery, John found himself alone with Mary in the barn. She looked at him with a seriousness that silenced words. "You've done well, John. But this journey isn't just about survival anymore. It's about discovering what Chance is meant to be." John's eyes met hers, questions swirling unspoken. Mary continued, "There's something remarkable in him, a strength that goes beyond muscle and bone, but it will take time, trust, and courage to unlock." The words settled in John's mind like seeds planted in fertile soil. He had fought so long to keep the colt alive, but now the fight was evolving into something more profound. That night, John sat by the window, watching the stars blink cold and distant. He thought of the past, of all he had lost, and of the future, uncertain, fragile, yet full of possibility. Chance was no longer just a symbol of survival. He was becoming a companion, a challenge, and a beacon. With Mary's guidance and the colt's quiet strength, John felt a slow stirring of transformation, not just in the horse, but in himself. The farm was healing, step by step, breath by breath. But the road ahead remained long and uncertain, and as summer stretched toward fall, the quiet promise of change lingered in the air, waiting to be claimed. The chill of early autumn settled over the farm like a quiet breath, softening the edges of long days and casting golden light across the fields. Chance, now a young horse in the prime of his youth, moved with a confidence that was hard-won. His coat gleamed in the morning sun, muscles toned beneath smooth skin, and his eyes held a spark, sharp and bright, a testament to the countless trials he and John had faced together. John watched him from the porch, hands clasped loosely over his weathered knees. Years of solitude had taught him patience, but even so, the transformation was almost impossible to believe. Chance was no longer the fragile foal who had barely survived those first brutal days. He was strong, resilient, and poised on the cusp of something greater. The farm had begun to breathe again, alive with quiet energy and the hum of life. Yet beneath the surface, the tension that had shadowed John for so long still lingered, a restless question that pressed against his chest. What did the future hold for Chance? For himself? As if answering that silent question, Mary arrived just as the first light broke through the horizon. Her presence was steady and reassuring, a reminder that John was not alone in this journey. She carried herself with the calm confidence of someone who had seen hardship and triumph in equal measure. "Today's the day," she said softly, eyes scanning the horizon. "The race." John's breath caught. The word hung between them, heavy with promise and peril. The local circuit had long been a tradition in the nearby town, a proving ground for horses and riders alike. To enter Chance was to stake everything on the colt's courage and strength, and on John's own resolve. He hesitated. The memories of setbacks, the injury, the storm, the long nights of doubt, crowded his mind. Could Chance truly face this challenge? Could he? Mary placed a hand on his arm. "You've prepared him well. He's ready. And so are you." The barn was alive with quiet activity as they readied Chance. John ran his hands over the colt's coat, feeling the taut muscles beneath his palm. The bond between them was unspoken but unbreakable. This was more than training or survival. It was trust forged in fire. As they led Chance to the starting line, the crowd's murmur swelled like distant thunder. Faces blurred past, neighbors, skeptics, friends, each watching, waiting. John's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and fierce pride. The race began with a sharp crack of the starter's pistol, and Chance surged forward. The world narrowed to pounding hooves and the rush of wind, the blur of earth and sky. John's voice rang out, steady and clear, guiding the colt through the twists and turns. Every muscle in Chance's body worked in perfect harmony, every breath measured and fierce. The strain of past injuries lingered like a shadow, but the colt pressed on, fueled by the bond they shared and the countless hours of care that had brought them here. Halfway through, the path narrowed near a steep embankment where the crowd's cheers faded into tense silence. Chance stumbled, just a moment, but John's voice cut through the stillness, steady and sure. "Steady. You've got this." The colt recovered with a burst of energy that seemed to come from nowhere, his legs carrying him faster, stronger. In that instant, John saw not just the horse beneath him, but the spirit they had nurtured together, the resilience that had defied every odds. The finish line loomed, and with a final surge, Chance crossed it first. The crowd erupted into cheers, the sound crashing over John like a wave. Tears blurred his vision as he wrapped his arms around the colt's neck, the joy and relief overwhelming. "You did it," he whispered, voice breaking. "We did it." But the victory was more than a trophy or a race won. It was the culmination of years of pain, hope, and unyielding faith. It was proof that second chances were possible, not just for Chance, but for John himself. In the days that followed, the farm seemed to glow with new life. Neighbors stopped by more frequently. their skepticism replaced with admiration. The whispers of doubt were silenced by the undeniable truth of what had been accomplished. Yet, even in triumph, John knew the journey was far from over. The past still lingered in quiet corners: the loss of his wife, the struggles of the farm, the uncertainty of what tomorrow might bring. But now, he faced those shadows differently. The bond with chance had given him strength, a reason to keep moving forward. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of amber and rose, John sat on the porch with Mary. The colt grazed nearby, calm and content. "You've come a long way," Mary said, her voice gentle but firm. "Not just with chance, but with yourself." John nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I never thought I'd find this again." "Hope," Mary smiled. "Sometimes, all it takes is one life to remind us what's possible." The silence that followed was comfortable, filled with the soft sounds of the farm settling into night. The stars blinked faintly overhead, distant but steady. John knew there would be more challenges ahead. The farm would demand resilience. The future would test their bond. But as he looked at Chance, strong, alive, and full of promise, he felt ready. For the first time in years, he believed in a future worth fighting for. And that belief was the most powerful thing of all.